I'd like to welcome everyone to this workshop, presentation, infomercial on heirs property. I think we've got an excellent group of people that have many years experience in this very important topic. One thing that I've found out is that every time I think that everyone knows everything about heirs property, there's another workshop and there's a whole another group of people that say that this was really good information. We have some good material and it's going to be recorded so it can be accessed at a later time. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started by first introducing our team. First we have Connor Bailey, Professor Emeritus from Auburn University, and I'll just let you, you can read that yourself. Then we have Savvy Horn, who's Executive Director of the Land Loss Prevention Project in Durham, North Carolina. We have Lorette Picciano, who's Executive Director of the Rural Coalition in Washington, D.C. Dr. Kara Woods, she's a recent graduate from our Integrative Public Policy and Development Program who did her PhD on air property. And then there's me, a professor at Tuskegee University. And our contact information will be presented at the end of the program. Okay, so first thing I want to do is an exercise. So if you all could get a piece of paper and a pencil, just so that you can write a number down, and we're going to refer to it near the end of the presentation. So what I'd like for you to do is first count the number of brothers and sisters that you have. Now, on either your mother's or father's side, as I want them separated, you can do both sides, but keep them separated. Count the number of her or his brothers and sisters. That is your uncles and aunts. And then the number of their children. That would be your cousins. Okay. Now add the number of you plus your brothers and sisters plus your cousins. And then write that number down and circle it. So in case that was a little confusing, which can be when I'm explaining things, here's an example of Ms. Smith. On her father's side, she has a brother, so Ms. Smith and her brother equals 2. Now her father had 2 sisters. One sister had 3 children, the other sister had 3 children. Those are the cousins. So add those 3 plus 3 plus 2, and the number is 8. Now on her mother's side, she still has her brother, so she and her brother equal 2. And then her mother had 3 brothers and 5 sisters. And then you see the number of children that they had. Okay, they average from 1 to 5 children. You add all those together, you get 25. So, if you go on your father's side, you'd have 8, on mother's side, 25. So you can do the same thing and just keep those numbers handy. Okay, this is going to come back later on. So now, the land, okay? We're talking about land, and in particular, heir property or heirs property. And I like starting out with this definition by attorney Craig Babb, who's retired from Alabama Appleseed. And he states that heir property or heirs property or heirship land is land owned as tenancy in common and reflects the historic practice among many low-wealth, often African-American families who convey their family property at death to other family members without a deed or valid probated will. This transfer to those heirs designated by state law, heirs at law, creates an unstable type of ownership in which each of the heirs designated by law owns a fractional share of the entire property. Thus, no single heir has clear title to the entire parcel, and unless all such heirs agree on the use and disposition of the land, its value is not accessible to any of the heirs. Now, that's a lot. So we're going to go over heir property several times through this afternoon. From that, just wanted to distill this. For heir property, you have a death of a property holder, the decedent. You have a lack of a will, that is, they died intestate. And you have family members related by blood and or marriage, that is, heirs, and the state in which the property is probated, okay? And then it's important to note, if you do not decide how you want your estate to be divided, that is, through a will, the state where your estate or property is probated will. They will do that. In Alabama, if you die in Alabama, you have property in Alabama, and you don't have a will, Alabama will tell you how your property will be divided. So one of the major questions is, how do I know if there's heir property in my region, my state, my county, or even my family? And we know that you all are service providers who work with folks, and this is information that you can pass on, but it also may be information that you could use yourself. So I'm going to take you briefly through a way that you can find heir property, okay? It is where available, because it's not available everywhere, but a lot of places, most places. You locate the County Revenue Commissioner's office online. And what I do is I type in the county, like Macon County, Alabama, GIS, or Macon County, Alabama, Revenue Commissioner's office. Once you connect to that site, you type in heir. So, for example, like I said, here's Macon County. And I typed in Macon County, you see at the top, Macon County, Alabama, Revenue Commissioner. And that's Iverson Gandy. He's our newly re-elected Revenue Commissioner. And you look at the bar at the top and it says GIS map. Click on that and you get this. And then you type in over here on the left side, owner name, and I just typed in heir. And at this particular program that they have in Macon County, all the parcels of land that are heir property populate. You see it within the county. All those purple dots are parcels of heir property. Now, labels of heir property are very important. So we have to ask, what do we call heir property? And when I typed in heir property for Macon County, I had over 1,000 parcels listed, okay? I'll show it here, 1,138. At the same time, Sumter County, Alabama, which is a similar Black Belt county in terms of size and population and percent minority population, I typed in heir and I got 1 parcel. So I thought, what's going on here? How can Sumter County only have 1 parcel of heir property and Macon County have over 1,000? Now, previous research has found that not everyone calls heir property heir property. And we'll show you some examples. That is, heir property may be found under the label deceased. It may be found under the label et al, estate. Now, not all property under et al or estate is heir property, but you find heir property under those labels. So if you look over here under Sumter County, you see that et al, you have 785 cases or tracts of land considered as et al. And most likely that's where their heir property is being put. So you see Macon County, 80% is considered, we find heir property. And in Sumter County, 96% might be under et al. Now, if we look at the 10 black belt counties, that is running from Macon County in the east all the way to Sumter County in the west, we find that going through the GIS sites of these counties, 20% are labeled air property, 17% deceased, 56% at all, and 77% as state. Okay. Now, if we're looking at other states, again, 10 counties with the highest percentage of African American citizens, we find that et al. In the state is where we might find most of the air property. That is, parcels that are designated as air property are number very few, less than 1%. And then in Texas, with those counties with the heaviest, 10 counties with the heaviest Latino population, again, we see that et al. In the state seem to be the favored areas where you might find air property, as opposed to that is specifically called air property at 1.77%. Now this is just a quick example of the value of air property and Macon County. And I'm just going to focus on the first row where it says air property. And we see that there are the 1,138 parcels owned by 903 owners. The land is assessed by the Revenue Commissioner's office at almost $24 million. The improved value of that land, that is land, land that has a barn, a house, fences, other permanent structures, adds an additional $12 million for a total value of almost $36 million. So what we see here is that in Macon County, there are over 12,000 acres labeled as air property with a total value of $36 million. And Connor Bailey will be talking more about this idea of how air property, its value is compared to land that has secured title. So these are the challenges when we're looking at air property. That is nomenclature. That is it air property? Does it fall under deceased, estate, et al.? But even within those designations, for example, deceased can be spelled DEC or DEC''D. And you can have all three in that tax assessor's office with different names of them. The same thing with estate. We have a case of estate where you might have 10 cases under estate and 100 cases under EST. And then the same for et al. It could be ET space AL or ETAL. There might be some overlap, or you could have completely different people in those designations. Further challenges come under, for example, estate. Now, estate may not mean an estate that is a person's property. It could be, Whippoorwill Estates, a gated community, or it could be part of a proper name. So when you're doing air property searches, you have to make sure that you cut all these or take these out. And then finally, access. That is, some websites give you complete and open access. Lowndes County is wonderful in Alabama. You go to their website, you type in air property, it has all the characteristics that you want. You push a button and it downloads it to an Excel spreadsheet and you're good to go. Some, like Macon County, will list the owners of air property, and then you have to click on each individual parcel to get the information you're looking for. So if you're looking, if there's 1,138 parcels of their property, then you have to open 1,138 different files to get the financial information that you're trying to get. Some have limited access. That is, they'll give you 1,000 different files, and then they stop. And then some will just block it. Unless you are registered or a landowner, then you can't access their files. And then finally, some you just have to pay. You pay, and then you get access to files. So again, this is just part of how you might look at air property in your community or even for your family.